Hello, this is the MCOM G9 Family Advocacy Program video tutorial about how to access and utilize the Fatality Review tool that we have created. My name is Chelsea Stevens and I work for Family Advocacy. I am going to show you how to pull the documents off of AKO where they are placed for your convenience, and the basics of walking through the Fatality Review tool that will be referred to as the FRT. I'm going to start by going through AKO, and my computer recognizes me and has saved all my stuff. So go ahead, you're going to have to input your own username and password into the system. I can put in my and if you're signing in to AKO from your work email, you're going to be using from your work computer rather, you're going to be using your CAT card. So you won't have to do any of that. If you choose to do this from home, you can do it from home. You're going to be receiving a link that should direct you directly to the site I'm about to go to. And if you don't, you can search for this page that I created. If you are a group member, which are the people I've placed over here, then you will have access to all these documents that you need to complete the Fatality Review tool, and to always be able to access it in case you lose it, or if you need the guide again, you'll always be able to access it from here. So this is going to be the page you should see once you receive the link that I would send you by right here, this button, the send link icon. So right now we're going to go through downloading the FRT user guide and the access file. So I checked both boxes and I'm going to click download. I'm going to accept that. And this will be different on your work computer. You will have a pop-up box instead of my things on, again, my Windows 7 computer. I'm going to go ahead and open the file that comes up, and I'm just going to drag this file to my desktop, and then we'll work from there to open the files. So here is my Fatality Review Tool Forum folder. Here's the access tool, the FRT. This is actual FRT, and here's the user guide. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to name this Backup. I'm going to choose to copy this file, and I'm going to place it in my backup folder. Okay, and I'm going to rename this Backup so I can make sure I have a backup and it's going to be empty and ready to use. Now I'm going to also create a test. And this is for me to be able to go through, to put in, to just run through it and play with it, figure out the boxes and buttons, and input a fake case to go through so that when you're ready and your actual fatalities have been inputted into the access database, that none of the practice fatalities or cases have been mixed up with the real ones. So that's why labeling these is very important. And I'm going to rename this to actual. And these directions are also in your user guide. Okay, I'm going to push enter to save that. Okay. So your Fatality Review Tool User Guide is very helpful, and I'm using that right now as I'm going through this tutorial with you. just so we're all on the same page and everything's clear. So you can have a printed copy of this, or keep it on your desktop to just go through it. But please thoroughly review this guide and make sure you are just to familiarize yourself with the Fatality Review tool. And I may call the Fatality Review tool the FRT, just for your reference. That is the acronym that I'm referring to. So it's 18 pages of very useful directions and highlights and actual pictures from the device, from the tool, and different things that you would want to pay attention to when completing the FRT. Okay, and we're going to go through all that briefly and go just a nice overview. Now the final tool, the final copy, is due back to MCOM G9, my office, no later than 1 May each year. It's going to be done through SAFE. And if you haven't done that before, if you haven't utilized SAFE, I'll do a quick overview of how to do it at the end of this tutorial. So now we're going to go open up the actual FRT. Access in Microsoft has different security things to verify and make sure that this is what you want to open, and I'll talk to you about that. The password for this database will be input. Alright, and you will receive the password to the database through email. Okay, so I'm going to click on Enable Content, and Access has then enabled the content. You will receive a pop-up window from Microsoft to verify you want to enable this content. So you click on the radial dial that's for enable this content, and then click OK. Alright, so this home menu is referred to as the switchboard. This is your main switchboard that you will use to go through and put in your information. So first, let's look at the adding a new decedent. I'm going to double click on that. Okay, so here we have the decedent page, the decedent table. And if you look at the top here, you have 9 different tabs of information from the case. What is very nice about this tool is we have built it so that it is very similar to the paperwork that you have already or should have on the fatality itself. And what you can do is, if it's done electronically, you can copy and paste that information and have it all here in one central location, and that will make it very much easier for you to do that way. So on the home page, we go through the basic demographics of the situation, of the fatality, what installation, and here at the decedent case number, we're going to use the year. So we're going to do 12, and then the case number, whatever number of the fatality it is for your installation that year. 01 for the first, 2 for the second, and so on and so forth. Case type, we're going to do a child or whatever your case happens to be like. And here you have all these options to fill in. Accidental, homicide, suicide, undetermined. And put the fatality's last name and first name. This is the name of the child. And just the same information goes in as it's requesting. Alright. And you see all these options you have Okay, so at this block, I'm going to show you one of the helpful hints that you can use. If you utilize the Shift and the F2 button, you will receive a pop-up of a text block. And in this block, you can have the better capability to input more and different fonts. And I will warn you that if you change the font here, that it won't save within the tool. However, it will be easier to utilize the shortcut, the Shift F2 shortcut, when you're presenting this tool on a larger screen, or if you are with a group of people and you want to make the font larger or bold, different colors for you. So that ability is there. So that's the Shift and the F2 shortcut. So here the text box is asking you to describe the decedent's immediate family at the time of the decedent's death. Ages, genders, whereabouts. Okay. All right, so you're going to go on and talk about their ages. Okay, all right, so you can go on and describe the residence at the time of the decedent's death, and then the home environment at the time of the decedent's death. Okay, and then the tool asks you if the decedent's spouse works. And then you're gonna, once you're done inputting the information on this page, on tab 1, tab 2 is strictly about the decedent, the death. In this case, it's the child. And the date of birth. Gender, race, the military status of the child, so family member, state of residence, non-military for children, NA. So all this is NA as well. Any special needs the decedent had, such as ADHD, ODD, Asperger's, any kind of special needs, feeding tubes, medical or otherwise, significant medical history, any kind of surgeries, or anything significantly medically relevant to this case should be input here. And behavioral health history, any kind of psychiatric care, and that was an A, off base. And was the decedent enrolled in EFMP or a decedent receiving EFMP respite care? Those are all very important questions that require to be answered. On tab 3, you'll go through and notice the services being received prior to the injury or the death of the decedent. Now these are prior to. So the child was at the behavioral health clinic, child received services from the church. Any of these that apply need to be checked, or if there was ever a time where the decedent was approached, or the decedent's family was approached, for example, to participate in the NPSP program, or for any other services that were requested or required and they refused, you would mark that here, and you would describe the details of the refusal of service. And then describing the support provided by the survivors following the death. Mother of child was offered survivor counseling and refused. Family moved. Any of the treatments or services that were tried and offered or accepted by the family should be input at that time. And again, the Shift F2 shortcut will allow you to better see and input the information. So priors on tab 4 goes over any of the history. Was the decedent known to FAB? Or did they have a local CPS file? Was decedent known to the MPs? Or was the decedent known to the civilian LE? And then you have the opportunity to describe the FAB LE cases. On the summary is where you will put in the XSUM that you currently already do for your fatality reviews. So if you need an example of this, I can provide you an example of this through email, but it is currently already done. You will just, what is the easiest thing is just to copy and paste that right here. The next block is the timeline of events, and within your guide, I have an example of what the timeline of events looks like. The date and what was happening on that date with the whole history of the family, if that is known. If not, then the timeline of the time around the fatality, with what happened, when 911 was called, when police was notified, when the FAPM was notified. That timeline of events should go in this block. And again, Shift F2 will open that box bigger for you to be able to input a whole lot of information. And then on tab 6, the incidents. This is where we're going to look at the investigative agencies that were involved following the death, who was investigating, the CID number that went along with the case. That will be beneficial to reference, please, so that we can make sure we have the correct documents from CID. The dates the decedent was killed and the date of the death. This is if the decedent's injuries were so severe that they weren't dead per se, they were on life support, and then life support was pulled at a later date. This would be where those dates would be input. And there are calendar shortcuts for that. Address would be input here. And then the location type. So here are your options to put where the death injury occurred, whether it was on or off base, restraining orders in place where the restraining order, other children witnessed the death, where in this case, did the siblings of this child see the death of the child? Was a weapon used? Describe the weapon. And then the methods used, you can check all that apply here. Strangulation, hanging, overdose, all those different methods of death. And then the main method used, you will choose from your options. Okay, moving on to tab 7 on the autopsy report. Now this is data that you can take directly from the autopsy report if you have it. So you will input what the autopsy cause of death was, the office completing the autopsy summary. Okay, you will select if the person was pregnant, and bear in mind there's male or young child, and substances at the time of death, sexual assault of decedent. If the child was sexually assaulted or the decedent was sexually assaulted, you have your options here. And then on the offender tab, now this tab is very similar, this table is very similar to the home screen, where you can select an offender that's already been put in. Say there was a case with multiple deaths and you put in the offender already, the offender would be here to choose from. So I'm going to choose right now to add a new offender. And this brings up the offender table. Okay, and this is very similar to the decedent table, except all this information is specifically about the offender. And we'll come right back to this. So we'll come right back to the offender tab. So let's go to recommendations. Okay, the records checked. So this is where you will put in which records were checked for this case, and which ones were available. Records exist but cannot share, and so on and so forth. So back to the offender. So for this case, I'm going to elect to add a new offender. And what this is going to do, again, is bring up this table, and it's going to have the same or similar information as I input for the child, except it's just about the offender. Relationship to sponsor. Self. Again, all your options you have to choose from. And then the deployment history is very important, and this should be known. Sometimes it may not be, but if you could get this information, that's very beneficial. And you will input the deployment details. Alright, and then answer all the drop-down boxes. Drop-down boxes are very helpful and found throughout this tool. So go on to the second tab on offender is continued demographics about the offender. And you input all his information here. Whether the offender was enrolled in EFMP, and this offender's current legal disposition. These gray boxes are very important to make sure they're filled out. So what is the offender's current legal disposition? Incarcerated, convicted, free, acquitted by civilian courts, and all this information it should be input prior to your Fatality Review Committee meeting. And at that Fatality Review Committee meeting is where you can convene as your committee and change or update any information that you have input in here as a group. And that is going to be discussed when I go over the FRC part of this tool. Services received prior to the injury or death of the decedents. Any of these that apply for the offender, you will check. The priors, any priors for the offender will be put here, and description of the cases involved will be copied and pasted here or input. Records check. This is where you will check for, go down the list for the offenders and check which records were done. So each of these is very important to be filled out as appropriate. Okay, so I have gone through the offenders table and all the tabs that have gone through it, and I am going to go back to my decedent. You notice I just clicked X because that's all you have to do. And see, as John Smith is already here, I'm going to add him here, and I'm going to put his relationship so it's just on the screen and easy to reference. And select all that's applicable. Alright, so I have input a decedent, I have input an offender, all into a case, and if I had the data for this test case, I would have input all that there. Alright, so I'm going to X out of here, and now we're back at the Army Fatality Review Tool switchboard. And so I've input my case, my fatality for my installation, and it is time to have an FRC meeting. So I'm going to add a new FRC meeting. Now what's really great about this is a very quick way to keep your meeting and your meeting minutes and the work done within the meeting in one location, and very easy roll up. So we're going to do the date, just like today, and take attendance. And this is very important so that you have a consistent view of who is attending the Fatality Review Committee, so that you can verify where you're getting your information. Then we're going to move on to tab 2, cases. And we're going to select which decedent case for the FRC agenda. So basically right here we're covering who we reviewed during the FRC conducted on 6 February of 2014. I'm going to select my Jane Smith, and this is going to be the initial review status. Now you can also select follow-up or final. And if you need to edit this, editing opens up the case. And here is where, with your FRC, you can come up with the different variables that were surrounding the circumstances of the fatality, and you can input them in their necessary tab. If say there was not an autopsy at the time of the death when you inputted the fatality, then here you can update that with the toxicology results or any other different findings. So it brings up everything, and you can just go back through it. And you can go through it with your team and review all the different circumstances involving the death. And I just simply X'd out of that. So I'm just going to review Jane Smith. However, you have the option to review as many cases as you can and edit as you can or are applicable for your FRC. On tab 3 is your training tab. Now on page 13 of the Fatality Review User Guide, I list an example of the type of trainings that MCOM would like to see put on this text box, such as HIPAA training, we did, for the attendees that have completed the HIPAA compliance training. This is very important that the attendees have completed a recent, within a year, HIPAA compliance training. And then I have another example of the type of training that you would want to be put on here, such as the FRC training or mock FRC. And then put in the date. Okay, so those are examples of the types of trainings. Any findings that you have for the cases that you're reviewing at your FRC. So in your guide, within that text box that I have provided you, there are definite examples for you to use as an example finding. So we ask that you provide a detailed statement of each issue that your team identifies. Be specific to help policymakers understand your team's significant findings and/or systemic issues. So a finding would look like so. And the statistics portion is very important, so we can get a good view of what your installation is dealing with. Okay, that is an example of a finding that we would like to see in the format. We want numbers, quantifiers, definite information to substantiate findings. So that would be your summary, and you can keep on like that with your different findings. Local recommendations. Okay, so for this, we would like you to provide a description of your team's recommendations if implemented, which agencies would carry out the recommendation, which populations will be targeted, and what resources will be required, if any. In this text box, you will record actions resulting from your team's fatality review. Please be specific about which team members took action and what they did, and if such action involved anyone outside your team membership. For example, establish active MPSP liaison with local MTF obstetrics and gynecology and pediatrics personnel to increase identification and referral of high-risk children under the age of 4. And then you'll put here your action office or POC, and you could put the name of the person that is going to look into establishing the MPSP and liaison and the office responsible. And this is all spelled out very concisely within the user guide. On tab 6 of the FRC committee, this is for the recommendations that require evaluation or execution by DA/DOD level offices. The same format is used here as we used on tab 5 of the local recommendations. So here you will record issues, and an example of those is listed within your fatality review guide, such as amend AR 608-18 to require the release of child abuse and domestic violence and suicide-related child abuse and domestic violence investigative reports from CIDC to the Installation Fatality Review Committee and the DA Fatality Review Board. The action office for that would be AXA at the DA or the DOD level. And so that would be specific for DA. And the difference for tab 5 rather, is that those recommendations are for your FAPM or for your local CIDC office, those type of things. So make sure you you clearly differentiate between those two different tabs for recommendations in your Fatality Review Committee. Alright, so basically that is an overview. If you go here, you can see that I have what we just went over. And here at the bottom, I want you to pay attention to this, because if I had more than one FRC here, there would be one of two, one of three, etc., etc. And you would just go forward. And see, I just clicked that and it just brought up a brand new one. So, and that's fine, because I could keep on going and then click back, and here's the first one that I originally did. Alright, so, and the edit existing offenders and decedents is just what it says. But again, I want you to note that down at the bottom, when you first click edit decedent, it will pop up with a blank one. But don't worry, because if you go to the next, the arrow, you will find which account you want to pull up and edit. Alright, so that is the Army Fatality Review tool. I'm going to save it. I'm going to close out. Now, I have my Fatality Review tool done. Super excited about that. Briefly, I'm going to go over save. I'm going to click Control and go to my save. AMRADEC website. Okay, so here you will have the option at work to log in to save with your CAT card, and I recommend you doing that. But I don't have my CAT reader at home working, so I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way. Alright, so here I'm going to browse for the file that I want to send, and I'm going to go to my desktop, find my FRT forum folder, and click on the actual Fort Army FRT. Now this will be renamed, and it should be renamed if you follow your guide, to your Fort Carson FRC, FRT, whichever one you're turning in. You can label it either. The year, again, we're gonna, for this year, for 2014, we're reviewing 2012, and the date that you're done with it. So that is the file name convention for that. So I'm gonna upload this, open that up. Alright, there's Privacy Act data in here because you will have completed and the demographic information, and it's very important that you make sure there's Privacy Act data marked on this. Description of file, so Fort Army FRC FRT completed. Okay, put in your description and then put in the email address. Now you can put in my email address, you can copy and paste it from the email, you can search me on the DoD 411, or it's easier for me just to type it in. Alright, so and then I'm going to click add, and there I am on the recipient. Now SAFE is very useful to transport patient data, and we're going to scroll on down. Encrypt email messages when possible. Notify me when the file downloads. Notify me when the file completes. Require the CAC for pickup. And encrypt the email when necessary. It's for official use only, protected by Privacy Act information. Upload that. I'm going to agree there. And then it's going to upload the access file and send it to me. It's very important that you label the access, the FRT, appropriately to your installation, because I'm going to have all the Army installations fatality reports, and I need to be able to differentiate and to organize them to create a roll-up report that will give us a better way to analyze the data. So please keep that in mind. And SAFE has been known to take a little bit. So if you haven't used SAFE before, it's a very good way to transport large files and files that need to be very secure. And from here, it's going to give me a confirmation page, and I may have to verify who I am sending it from here. And on your end, if you've never used SAFE before, you might have to verify who you are. And by doing that, SAFE will send you an email for email verification, and all you do is click on the link and input the password that the email has sent you. There's directions to that, and if you need to, call me and I will walk you through that portion. So this has been our Fatality Review Tool overview, and if you have any questions or need anything further, I am more than happy to walk through this again with you. Again, this is Chelsea Stevens. It's been my pleasure serving you. Thank you.